I absolutely love the life I have now. I am so blessed. I am just beyond blessed, and I love my existence here. The day that I pass on and I go to God, I'm not going to shed a tear at all. I'm not even scared. I cannot wait until I get to be in His presence again. But in the meantime, I've got work to do, and I've got people to help, and I've got me to work on. This housing and all these wires. So I'm messing with that, and I got this feeling like I was going to get electrocuted, right? And I was like, okay, I better go unplug it. So I went, and he says, I'm a man of science, not of faith, but he said, you're a miracle. Go home and consider yourself lucky.
Thanks for being back to my show, Growth Factor. I'm Amalia, and today you are looking at Ryan Rampton. The reason I have him here is I call my show Growth Factor because there's so many ways to grow. Physically, mentally, spiritually, even nutritionally. So Ryan has had a near-death experience, a topic that is just growing in popularity, and I love it. So Ryan, can you please tell us your story? And I'm so happy you're here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm a paramedic firefighter. I'm also a photographer. Back in 2001, I had a photography studio. Earlier in the day, photographing a family, and they had some wild kids, and they knocked over one of my lights. My kids were in the projector room that has a projector theater, and the projector, we were watching a movie in there. Well, I got kind of bored watching the kids show and decided I'd go out and try to work on this light and pulling it apart. And I've got like the 3 metal prongs that are inside like the back of a computer, and it's got the black plug that plugs in, and then it's got this housing and all these wires. So I'm messing with that, and I got this feeling like I was going to get electrocuted, right? I had 4 different lights plugged into, the outlets, and I unplugged one. In my brilliance, I decided to use my teeth as pliers. Yeah, that's the look I usually get from people. It's like, oh, no. And so I put the cord in my mouth, and the electricity, the 3 metal prongs touched my tongue, and the electricity went straight into my brain. I could not move a muscle. I mean, pretty strong guy, and I'm sitting here trying to pull on this, and I couldn't even budge it. I couldn't move at all. I was just locked up. And so that's one of the things that 110 volt electricity does more than like 220 or even higher voltages, is it locks you up and locks your muscles up. So I was completely frozen, could not move, and I was not really worried because I had had so many times that I should have died. And we talked a little bit about that on the phone earlier. All these times that I should have died, and I was miraculously saved. So I kind of figured that's what was going to happen, that somehow I would be miraculously saved, like I'm always saved, And so it's going on, and I'm trying to move my eyes to see if somebody could see me, or hopefully the circuit breaker is going to pop or something. And none of that happens, and it just keeps going. And then I could see black smoke billowing out of my mouth. So I was being fried. I should have died in that. We ended up rolling on our backs and spreading putting a water curtain between us, but I ended up getting burned real bad. And miraculously, survived that. No, I can't die a hero. Almost died in a plane crash. No, can't die, in a blaze of glory. Motorcycle accidents, car crashes, scuba diving accidents. No, nothing I'm going to enjoy. How am I going to die? I'm going to get a Darwin Award for doing something so stupid, I'm going to be a joke on the internet. That's what went through my head. I remember where I said I couldn't move at all. And I remember looking up into the light, and I could see this light streaming down from above. And even though I couldn't move, so it was my spirit that kind of looked up, and I saw the light, and it was the most beautiful light I'd ever seen. It's so hard to describe, but it was like streaming down from the ceiling. And I remember going into the light and traveling, and as far as I could see, I was the only one there. But I knew where I was going. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm dead. And I'm so excited. I'm like, I am going to go home to Father. That's what I thought in my head. I'm going home to Father. And I was just filled like a little kid Christmas morning with anticipation. Could not wait. So excited. And then up above me in the white room, I saw this being like way up high, and it kind of came down and stood in front of me. And it was a being of light in the shape of a person. The most beautiful feeling I've ever had came over me of love and acceptance. Like I was just so complete, so fulfilled. It's so hard to put into words. I mean, I've done a lot of exciting things, fun things in my life, traveled the world, scuba dive with sharks, run into burning buildings when everybody else is running out, skydive, race motorcycles, all these exciting, fun things. And if you take everything and put it together that I've ever done in my life, it's not a millionth of what it feels like to be with God. It was so amazing and just so healing and beautiful. And God shows me my life like it's flat going in front of my eyes, and I'm seeing all these things that I've done, bad things done to me, good things happening, just the whole thing. And the curious thing was, I grew up in a very religious home, very judgmental too. And I always thought of myself as a bad person because I wasn't perfect. I almost hated myself. Never thought I could be able to go to heaven or be with God because I was such a sinner, I thought. When everything that God showed me, that even bad things that I thought were bad that I'd done, I felt nothing but love and pride from the Lord. Like, did you see what you learned there? Wasn't that beautiful? Like everything was this beautiful lesson for me to learn about me. There was no judgment. And even the bad things other people did to me. I was married for 15 years. The wife ended up running off with her best friend's husband and left me and the 4 little kids. So I see that part, and I had nothing but love and compassion for her. And I was thinking to myself, like, why was I so upset about that? It was such a beautiful lesson for me to learn about me. And I felt nothing but the utmost love and compassion for my ex-wife. Then when I got back to earth, I'm like, nah, I still hate her. No, I'm kidding. I did. Being with God and seeing all this through God's eyes, through the eyes of unconditional love. God says, do you want to come home with me, or do you want to go back to them? And he did this with his hand. And the floor we were standing on was pure white. And then it starts going foggy and then clear. And then we're standing in the air about 20 feet above my kids in the theater room. So like there's no ceiling. I can see right down onto the kids. And they're playing in the theater room, and they're like making little shadow puppets in the projector beam. And my heart just sunk. And I knew that my kids needed me. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I've got to go back to them. And it was the hardest decision that I had ever had to make. And like, it was so traumatic to come back to the people that I love the most in this world. So hard to decide to come back and be with them and leave God. Like it just was so hard to leave. But I chose to, and God said, okay, I will see you again. And I thought I was going to get like a high five or a pat on the butt. So go get them, Tiger, get back in the football game, No, it was like getting hit by a truck. So instantly I'm back in my body, right? And electricity hits me so hard, and it was all pain again. And I'm like, why would God send me back to my body and not get me off the electricity? And I heard God's voice, and he said, oh, did you ask for help? Just like that. And I was like, I kind of missed that part. And I said, dear God, please help. And as soon as I said that, the cord moved like somebody was pulling on it, because I'm still sitting here doing this thing, and like the cord moved. I was, holy crap. And so I start pulling with all my strength. And the interesting thing was, I could be the strongest guy in the world, and I'm not going to be able to overcome my muscles in pulling it out. But God made up the impossible part. But he still made me give every bit of effort that I could. And then he still wants us to do our best, do the best that we can. And I think that was my metaphor in this whole thing. So I the cord pops out of my mouth and everything goes black. It was like my vision went shoot. So I don't know if the electricity was keeping me awake, but basically because my heart had been frozen, every muscle in my body had been frozen. I had not had, like, I wasn't alive, for 6 minutes. So I hit the ground and crash. And my 12-year-old comes running out of the other room, hears me fall down, comes over, starts shaking me, rolls me over, and shaking me, Dad, Dad. And all of a sudden, I opened up my eyes and opened up my mouth, and black smoke's coming out of it. And he went, oh my gosh. And he went and he grabbed the phone, he called 911, and they took me up to the hospital, and they wheeled me into the ER, and the doctor comes in, he looks at my mouth, and I had charcoaled a hole through my tongue the size of a quarter. I still got a nice little scar out of it, but it had taken about the size of a quarter, and it was like if you'd taken a hot dog up camping and cooked it till it crumbled and was just black. That's what my tongue looked like. It had melted the fillings of my teeth. It got so hot in there. Fillings had all turned shiny again, and one of them had exploded. The doctor said, I'm not worried about your tongue. I'm not worried about your teeth. What I am worried about, he said, 110 cooks you from the inside out, where 220 will blow off body parts and burn you externally. He said, I'm worried about every one of your organs being cooked. You could still die tonight. You could go into multi-organ failure tonight, and every one of your organs could shut down because of damage. So he said, we're going to keep you overnight. We're going to monitor you. We're worried your airway is going to swell shut. So we're going to intubate you and put you out. Next thing I know, this morning, I wake up, tubes out of my throat. Nurse is taking my IV out. The doctor comes in and he says, well, I've discharged you from the hospital. You can go home. He said, I didn't believe the results of your tests. So I had him run it again. And they still came back with 0 enzymes in your blood. He says, that's impossible given the amount of damage in your mouth. He said, like when your heart gets damaged, it goes off troponin. He says, we'll be able to tell by the enzyme test which ones. And he says, you had 0 enzymes in your blood. You have no damage outside of your mouth. He said, I even went down the 3rd time and made sure they did the test right. And he says, it still came back with 0. And he says, I'm a man of science, not of faith. But he said, you're a miracle. Go home and consider yourself lucky. So I went home and didn't quite know what to think about this whole thing. I went through about 12 years where I didn't feel worthy of talking about it. To talk about God, you have to be a good religious person, like a priest or, in Mormon, you'd be a bishop or whatever, and I felt like, no, I probably do all these things that are sins, and I didn't ever feel worthy to talk about God. I got divorced, got remarried about 3 or 4 years later. Life goes on. And I had this experience. I was going through my second divorce 12 years after my near-death experience. And I'm going through a divorce, and my world had just fallen apart. Like I'd lost this business that was worth millions, and my wife's leaving me, and my world just fell apart. And I started to pray to God. I was up, it was New Year's Day on 2013, and I was up at a place called Lava Hot Springs up in Idaho. God, just take me. I am done. I don't want to be here anymore. Please, please just take me home. I made a mistake coming back. I don't want to be here. I don't want to take my own life, but, drop a meteor on me, give me a heart attack, an aneurysm. I don't care what, I'm done. I am so done with this life. I heard God's voice for the first time since he said to me, oh, did you ask for help? And he said, leaving my presence one time is traumatic for everyone because you leave nothing but love. For you to remember what my love feels like and chose to leave a second time has left such a hole in you that you've tried to fill it with everything but me. But what you really want is me. And I felt this clunk happen. Like, I don't even know what it is, but it was a physical clunk, like something clunked into place in my body. And I felt like God claimed me. And I shouted at the top of my lungs. I was like, dude, I'm yours, And God's dude, if you didn't know. That's one of his other names, you know. And so I'm like yelling, like, dude, I'm yours. I dedicated everything I had, everything I did. I would tell people about him all the time. I would tell them about my near-death experience. I think the biggest lesson that I got out of all of this, number one, that God loves you unconditionally. And number two, the most important thing that God taught me was how to love and forgive myself. He had an angel come to me and tell me to write my book that is all about my near death. Yeah. So it's called You Were Born a Warrior, and it's on Amazon. This angel told me to paint a portrait of my soul. And I went, what the heck does that mean? I grew up Mormon, LDS, and I never felt good enough. Like I always felt like I was a terrible person, and I would always fail, you know, and not be a good person. I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. Like I could not look in my own eyes. Like I'd look away. I wouldn't even want to look into my eyes. That's how I felt about myself. It was terrible. And all of these lessons that I got from God and were about how to love and forgive yourself. And I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. And God kept giving me these experiences. And God said, what kind of love do I have for you? And I said, unconditional. And he said, what kind of love do you have for you? And I went, loathe? Did you say loathe? Because, yeah, I loathe myself, not love. God said, until you can love and forgive yourself, you can't love and forgive your neighbor. And if you're not loving and forgiving your neighbor, you're not loving me. And that made so much sense to me, but it took me years and years to be able to say to myself, I love you in spite of your sins. I love you in spite of your mistakes. But I try to love myself unconditionally like God does. And when I did that, that's when I started to grow, the growth factor, you know. That's when I started to, my life changed and I started to grow. When I started learning how to love and forgive everything and focus on what I wanted and what I wanted to be versus what I was looking back all the time. Like if you're always looking back on your past and your mistakes, you're always looking back on like Saul's, when Lot and his wife left Sodom and Gomorrah, she looked back and she turned to a pillar of salt, you know. It's us looking back on those things instead of looking forward to where you want to go, what you want to do. I just got told that I was supposed to tell you this other little story. Right after my God change, I'm trying to be perfect, okay? I'm trying to be the best Christian, Mormon, whatever. I wasn't sure what I was at that point anymore because I really hadn't been going to church. Anything I think God wants, treating people kindly, not judge me. I end up making some mistake. I'm single at the time, so I'm trying to be celibate. And of course, I've gone quite a while this way. And then some girl called me up and asked me if I want to come over watch a movie. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that sounds real fun. So I go over, and 3 minutes into the movie, she wasn't interested in watching the movie, you know. And all of a sudden, I find myself in a position that I compromise myself. I'm beating myself on the, you know, just with this mental stick, you know, you piece of crap, you know, you gave yourself to God, you know, and then what are you going to do? As soon as first sin comes along, you're just like, oh yeah, sign me up. I'm so mad at myself. And I prayed literally for 2 hours on my knees until I was so worn out, climbed into bed, and I shut off the light. This gold coin about this big, about the size of a salad plate, shows up in front of me. And it looks like an old Roman coin. It's got like a guy in profile. It's got the fronds in his hair. I'm putting my hand through it, and it doesn't go away. Like it's still there. Am I having a stroke? You know, what the heck's going on? And I heard God's voice. He says, this is you. And I went, okay, that didn't clear anything up. Like what? The old guy on the coin? I don't know what you're trying to show me. And then the coin started to rotate real slow, about like this. And it comes around to the backside, and the backside looks like it had been at the bottom of the ocean. It was all black and corroded and had flakes on it, and just looked like you couldn't even tell it was gold anymore. I heard God's voice, and he says, I love both sides of you the same. And I went, wow. And then the coin disappeared. And there in the dark. It just wasn't equating in my brain because I'd grown up so much thinking I'm going to be held accountable for everything I've done. I'm going to have to pay for it, and like God, how can God love the bad part of me? I don't get it. It blew me away that He could love both sides of that coin the same. The side that's pure, shiny gold, the side that's corroded. Well, then I go to sleep and I have this dream, and I'm going through the forest, and I've got this big canvas sack on my back, and I'm trying to make it through this forest, and I'm getting caught in the branches, and I've got this feeling to get out of there, like almost panicky, like I've got to get out of here. And I'm trying to make it through the forest, and I'm getting scratched and getting the bag caught up on branches and just getting super frustrated. And I see this off to the left of me. I see this path running kind of along just off in the distance a little bit. So I'm trying to make it over to this path to get out of the forest. And then I look along the path, and there's a man walking along it. And he's got a white robe on, and it comes down to about in the middle, just below his knees. And he's got bare feet and sandals on. And I will not look at him. I'm too ashamed. And I'm just looking down at his feet, just bawling. And he said, "Give me your burden." And I hugged it, and I said, "No, I love you too much. I'm not going to do this to you. I can't." And he said, "Give me your burden." And he knelt down, and he took I was looking at the ground, and he lifted up my chin, made me look him in the face. And he said, "Your sins are forgiven." And I woke up just bawling. So those experiences, and then many others I talk about, all the other times that I almost died, are in my book. And I talk about these experiences. And the biggest thing that I can share with people is God loves you. God forgives you. You are perfect, but yet we're human. We've got that corroded side of the coin that just comes along with having this body. And we have to learn how to love and forgive that side so that we can nurture that light side, that we can separate the light from the darkness. So anyway, those are some of my stories. I've got a lot of them. Oh, I only saw God. And pure white room, and saw God. And to me, it seemed like God the Father. So I know a lot of people see other stuff, and it was really interesting. So when I first started writing my book, I thought, it seems really boring to me just to only meet God in a white room. I've had these other experiences, like when the angel came, I saw it was actually Michael the archangel. I have him tattooed on this alarm here, but because Michael came to me and told me in the pre-existence I was an angel warrior, and that's why my book is named what it is. In the heavenly realm, it was only God and me and this white room, and me and all my life.
When you saw what you saw two beings of light, maybe three. You saw what you say, the Father, God. You saw a barefoot person and an angel. What did their faces look like, and how do you know who they were?
God was pure light. And he was so bright to look at that I couldn't really see any features at all, except he was in the shape of a personage. But the feeling was so overwhelming that I knew it was Father. And that's how I related to it. That's how I knew. Christ, on the other hand, was in a dream. And rather than with my spiritual eyes, it was a dream. And he looked similar to some of the paintings I've seen, but not quite. When he made me look into his eyes, it seemed like there was colors in his eyes that I'd never seen before, that I could never even describe here on earth. And again, the feeling of love. And then when I saw Michael was like all dressed in this gold armor, and he was so glorious and in armor, and just shined, and you could see the power of him. But he was like, again, light, just shining through. And like, he told me who I was, and gave me these messages. I've got him tattooed on my side. So after my near-death experience, and I had what I call my God change. And I had that God change. And then during that 2 weeks, I had so many things happen, like visions, different things. One of the things before I go to Michael, I was walking down the street one day. This homeless lady come up to me and asked me for money. I was just leaving. I'd photographed a wedding in Salt Lake, and I was walking back to my car. She asked me if I had any money, and I said, no, I don't. And she looked like she was probably 35, but she looked 70, right? I mean, like wrinkles, rotten teeth. She just looked terrible. And I thought in my head as I was walking away, I thought how repulsive she was. That was the word that came to my head. And I heard God's voice, and he said, oh, really? Would you like to see how I see my daughter? And I stopped, and I'm like, yeah. And I turned back to her, and her spirit came out of her body, and I could see like this gold, reflective, almost like a hologram image of this spirit outside of her body. And she was beautiful, like absolutely stunning, beautiful. And I was just staring at her with my jaw open, flabbergasted. And God said, this is how I still see my daughter. And she's looking at me like I've lost my mind. I got to tell you what just happened to me. So I shared with her what had happened. I asked her if she believed in God, and she goes, yeah. I said, when's the last time you prayed? And she goes, I'm not religious. I said, that doesn't matter. I says, you know, this is how God sees you. And I judged you. I didn't tell her I thought she was repulsive, but I said I had judged you, and God reprimanded me for it. And I thought, how many times do we do that? Well, so I had all these different experiences happen during this 2-week period of time. One night I was doing some meditation, and I felt this presence. When I closed my eyes, I was laying down, I could see him just clear as could be. And when I opened my eyes, all I could see was like a glowing, I would say like an orb of light. And so I closed my eyes, and I could see Michael in his armor. And that's when he told me that I needed to paint a portrait of my soul, which didn't make any sense to me. And he told me in the pre-existence, before we came to this earth, that I was an angel warrior, and I was by his side as one of his warriors. How I felt about myself was really terrible. That's not me. I'm a piece of crap. It felt God reprimand me. Like it was almost like, boom, do not question who you are. Whoever's listening to this right now, your spirit's amazing. Your spirit is perfect. Your spirit serves God and hasn't made all the mistakes your mortal body has. Your spirit is the embodiment of love and perfectness. And it has always been. The spirit has always existed. Right now, you're experiencing life in this mortal form as whoever you are. Like I'm experiencing life as Ryan, who's a firefighter, a paramedic, and a photographer, but that isn't really who I am. I'm the infinite being that has always been. And we see little glimpses of this. And I think this is one of the keys to life, is understanding. Like I think that's why Michael came to me and told me who I was. So I can understand this, that I am more than this flesh. I'm more than this mortal frame. I am this infinite being that has always existed, that serves God. I'm not the person that makes all these mistakes and thinks of himself as like lower than low. And see your own divinity, see your own light, but through a veil of humility.
Is there soul memory?
This is probably my own idea more than it is. Like I have prayed to God about this, and the answer that I got from God was not that it didn't happen, but I asked him about this past life experience because I had done a guided meditation with somebody that did this for me. And I asked him about this past life experience, and he says, that's not important. Focus on what you're doing right now. So that didn't really deny that there's past lives. So I lean toward that we do. God, he's outside of time. So time is only reckoned unto man. God created time for us to experience this life. So for a past life to occur, it's really not past, it's concurrent. It's happening the same time as this. So when God did show me this. If you look at it like here's World War II or World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Korea, you know, all this stuff happens here. Here's the present time, but it goes like this. Well, for God showed me that that axis is rotated 90 degrees. So everything is layers. So nothing is this way, it's this way. So it's an X and Y axis. So that's why God knows alpha to omega, everything is now. So right now we're having this conversation, but World War I's happening. To have a past life is more like we're having concurrent lives, so we're having these experiences. Now, if this life is a, let's say, school for us to come down and learn, if we came down here to have a physical body and to experience life, could you get all the knowledge and all the experiences that you wanted out of this one life? To me, I would say no. What are we down here for? We're down here to learn and to grow spiritually. This is a laboratory for us, a school for us to improve. Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan became the greatest basketball player probably to ever play the game. And you know, I would argue that he has been, and yet he was told he wasn't good enough to play high school basketball. He got cut from the team, told he wasn't good enough. And the guy that replaced him didn't even go on to play college ball. And Michael Jordan went out and threw 1,000 basketball free throws every day and just practice. And that opposition of him being told he wasn't good enough fueled him to greatness. And I think everything in this life is about opposition, if you think, and contrast. You don't know what it's like to be young until you've gotten old. You don't know what it's like to be healthy until you've been sick. You don't know what it's like to be in love until you had your heart broken. We need these negative experiences to really help us gain an appreciation for what we have.
So I lean definitely towards what you're saying. And because I don't want to offend other religions who don't like the R word, I just say soul memory.
Right.
Cell memory.
So I've had this discussion with my mom too, and she definitely believes like in only one life, and this is our test to prove ourselves to God. But how can you prove yourself to an infinite being that knows alpha to omega? He knows me when I'm 5 years old. He knows me when I'm 85 at the same time. Knows everything I'm ever going to do. So why am I here to prove anything to him? I'm not. I'm here to learn and to grow with my experiences and to teach me. And so I definitely believe, I've read some of those amazing stories of these 3-year-old kids remembering these past lives. You know, and it makes a lot of sense that we would come and we would learn again, you know, and we would go back for other classes and experiences. So the bottom line, I think, for anything is still comes back to one of the greatest lessons we came here to learn is how to learn how to forgive yourself and how to be loved.
Thank you, Ryan, for being here. I really appreciate your story. I just feel like we're going to see in the comments a lot of people's souls that you're soothing, people who've lost a loved one or wondering why they came from such abuse. And so that's why I want to interview you, is your story is so soothing, especially given, you know, what's happened to all of us 2020 to 2024. We've been used and abused and hurt in so many ways, and families have been split up and siblings have been split up. So these stories like yours are more important than ever. And I notice mainstream media podcasters are starting to interview people like you. And, you know, 30 years ago, we couldn't really talk about it. Like you said, it took you 12 years to talk about it. So I want to thank you for being here, and know if there's anything else you want to say before we go.
Just mostly remember that you're loved and that everything that's happened to you has happened for a reason. Everything that you've gone through has been there to make you stronger, been there to make you understand and appreciate what we have and appreciate the moments. You know, I even think about the people that I've lost, that I don't have with me anymore, that passed on, and how painful and how much I still miss them every day. And then I think about the people that are here still, that I don't tell every day how much I love them, that I don't tell how much I care about them. And it just gives you a lot of perspective of how to live your life by, you know, the contrast again, because that's what it's all about. It's about noticing that and being the best most aware, present that you can be every day, being that light under the world, being that shining example of who we truly are, that we are beings of light, that we are daughters and sons of God, and that we are here for a purpose, and that's to uplift each other and to learn about ourselves.